Good evening. My name is Mike Masding. I'm co-chair of the UKFPO, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar about the pre-allocation application process. And we hope you find it useful. We are going to record the webinar, and it will go onto the UKFPO website and our YouTube channel. So if there's anything that you didn't quite catch, or if your colleagues want to see it, then it should be available in a few days' time. Next slide, please. As well as myself, we also have Dr. Tom Yap, who is the Special Advisor for Recruitment to the UKFPO, who's going to go through the process. And then later on, when it comes to the questions and answers, we've also got Elaine Colasso, who is the National Foundation Programme Manager. Next slide. So what is pre-allocation all about? Well, it's in an effort to try and support applicants to the foundation programme who have a particular need to be in a geographical location in the UK. Now, I really emphasise the word need, who must be in a certain place for certain reasons. And in a few minutes, Tom will go through all the different criteria. We fully appreciate that all applicants will probably want to be in a certain place. But this is not just about where someone wants to be, it's about where they must be because of their personal circumstances. The criteria that we've agreed for pre-allocation have gone through all of our governance with our various different groups and stakeholders looking at them and have been agreed as such. And so in order to be pre-allocated to a foundation school, you must meet one of the nationally agreed criteria. The circumstances that meet the criterion must be current. It can't be something that's going to be in the future, but there is the opportunity to apply for an inter-foundation school transfer later on in the process if circumstances change between application to the foundation programme and allocation at the end of February 2025. We'll cover this in future webinars. So what we're talking about here are applications for pre-allocation to a foundation school, which must be submitted during the national application window, which opens in a couple of weeks' time. And this will be alongside the main application form on the Oriel system. We get a lot of applications for pre-allocation, some of which meet the criteria and some of which don't. So for that reason, so that we can make the best of our resources in assessing every individual who applies, you can only apply for pre-allocation under one of the criterion. What we'd like you to do is have a think if you meet two or more of the criteria and think about how you can best evidence your application and which of those criteria would fit best under. If in doubt, then please seek advice from your medical school. We have national panels which have representatives from foundation doctors, foundation school directors, foundation school managers, and the UKFPO on and meet and review and agree outcome for every single application that we receive for pre-allocation. Next slide, please. What pre-allocation doesn't do is guarantee allocation to a particular hospital, trust, or location. In the first instance, allocation is to a foundation school only. If your pre-allocation application is approved, you can then discuss with the foundation school where you think you need to be and how your needs can best be met. Although we can't absolutely guarantee that that will be the case, and we can't guarantee a match to a particular job or rotation. All foundation schools work really hard to try and achieve this as much as we possibly can, but this would be another step that if your pre-allocation application is approved, that you can then discuss with the foundation school. none of the information about any reasonable adjustments will necessarily be passed on to your employers. Remember, reasonable adjustments for you to be able to work as a foundation doctor, which are really important, but that's made by the employer, which is the hospital or trust that you're going to be worked at. So that would still need to be organised by yourself through discussion with your employer when you start there, or preferably before you start there, of course, or through the STEP form, which is the supporting transition and entry into practice form, which comes later on in the year. So just remember, I'll just really repeat, pre-allocation is about where you must be. It's not about somewhere where you'd like to be. It's where you must be for the criteria, which Tom will now go on and present.
Good evening, everybody. So as Mike says, my name's Tom Yap. I'm the Foundation School Director in Wales, and I'm also the advisor on recruitment to the UKFPO. So we have 5 criteria, although criterion 5 is split into 2. Criterion 1, you are a parent or legal guardian of a child or children under the age of 18 who reside primarily with you or for whom you have significant caring responsibilities. That hasn't changed for several years. Criterion 2, this is a significant caring responsibility. You have a significant caring responsibility for a family member, partner, or friend. We don't dictate exactly what the relationship is, but you have to have a significant caring responsibility. This also includes people who have applicants who have a primary carer role. Okay, I think it's clear what you need to read the guidance on this, but your caring responsibilities should extend beyond weekends. So it's not just about whether you provide care at the weekends outside normal working days. Criterion 3 now relates to health condition or disability, and you will have a health condition, physical or mental health and well-being, or disability for which treatment and ongoing follow-up for that condition is required in a specific location, and that's an absolute requirement. Obviously, particularly since COVID, outpatient care has been provided in a more virtual way, and so that may not require pre-allocation to a certain location. Criterion 4 was previously known as unique and extends to extraordinary circumstances, and they really do have to be extraordinary circumstances. If you feel you don't quite meet criterion 1, 2, 3, or 5, that doesn't necessarily mean they are extraordinary, and you apply under criterion 4. Criterion 5 is a relatively small category, and this is related to your medical school who believe that there may be educational reasons for you being pre-allocated to a specific location. And then criterion 5B relates to those applicants who enter medical school through a widening participation or a widening access initiative and have received additional financial support during their degree. I've got to try and do that there. So the timeline, as Mike was saying, is that registration for applicants opens on the 17th of September, and you will have all been nominated if you're finally a medical student from the UK or were a finally a student graduating before August 2020. After August 2023, you will be nominated, and you should register. Applicants should note the email that your medical school used, and then you will use that. That will be sent to you to confirm your registration. Application opens the following week, and it opens on the 25th of September. And more importantly, it closes on the 9th of October at midday. And not only do you submit your application, but that's the time you have to submit your pre-allocation request. So pre-allocation requests are at the same time as your application to the Foundation Programme 2025. Just to keep things, the results or the outcomes of pre-allocation are released to applicants on the 28th of November. General guidance. So we've been working hard behind the scenes, and the guidance is now available on the UKFPO website. If you land on the homepage, you can find it relatively simply, but also you can go look for pre-allocation guidance for FP 2025. You must use the 2025 application forms from previous years if you have applied previously, or you're looking back and using old forms. They will not be accepted. So the key thing is to use the right forms and follow the current guidance, because it has changed slightly, and we're going to touch on that as we go. So key changes. So the changes this year have not been so much about the details of the criteria, but actually sort of the definition of each criterion. So in the past, we had two separate carer criteria within 2A and 2B, primary carer or significant carer, and these have now been merged into a single criterion, significant caring responsibilities. Medical condition has now been renamed to health and disability, and unique, as I mentioned before, has been renamed extraordinary circumstances. Further changes, there's been a character limit has been introduced to the application forms. Some of you like to write quite a lot, but actually there's no great need. It just needs to explain how you meet that criterion. You do not now have to sign a declaration on your pre-allocation application. This has been removed because as you are submitting your form, it will recognize that you, as that applicant, are submitting that pre-allocation application at the same time. So I have to just keep moving my little box out of the way. Mandatory fields are now identified with an asterisk, and in bold. If a field is marked as mandatory and left blank, the application is likely to be rejected by the National Review Panel. As Mike said earlier on, it's very much about the need to be somewhere and you being able to meet the requirements for each criterion. Winding participation application form no longer includes an applicant or medical school supporting statement box. That's because that information isn't relevant to the application. And by completing the form, you and your medical school are declaring that you meet all the necessary requirements of that criterion. We're then going to go on to proof of address. So proof of address, as Mike said, your application for pre-allocation needs to relate to your current circumstances and not future circumstances. And for that, you need to have proof of address with your name on it to match. The address must match the one on their application, on your application form, and must be in the location or foundation school region that you require pre-allocation to. The proof of address must be submitted at the time of application. Okay, and you can see Appendix 1 in the applicant guidance for the list of acceptable evidence. So all evidence used as proof of address must be dated or issued within the last 3 months prior to the close of the application window. This also applies to driver's licenses. Now, driver's licenses obviously last for 10 years, and therefore they can relate to evidence of proof of address up to 10 years ago. So the 3-month rule, if you've had your driver's license updated within the last 3 months, that can be used. Okay. Other evidence can be used, things like bank statements, etc. We will accept annual, something up to 12 months if it's an annual tax bill, such as your council tax. So the application forms are in MS Word documents. You must use these forms and not copy and paste parts and forms and photos of the form into a different document. The completed pre-allocation form and supporting evidence must be uploaded onto Oriel at the same time as your application. Okay, the requested foundation school must be preference first on Oriel. So when you're ranking your foundation schools or units of application, your first preference must match your pre-allocation request. Well, all applications are submitted in one go, and missing evidence cannot be submitted at a later date. So in the past, there was a two-stage appeals process where the first stage was actually to allow people to submit evidence that they failed to submit at the time. That no longer exists. So everything has to come in at the time of your application. If mandatory information, supporting evidence or proof of address is missing, the application is likely to be rejected. There is no second chance to resubmit or correct errors. We do spend quite a lot of time on this, and as Mike says, the number of applications have gone up over the years. I think we now have up to 10 days set aside for the national panels, and that these panels will involve a foundation school director, a foundation school manager, a trainee in the form of an F2 doctor. You have medical schools or medical schools council representation, and we also have representation from the foundation, the UKFPO. So it's a rigorous process. We consider all the applications on their merits, they can be quite long days, having sat through many of them myself. Applicants will be notified of their application outcome by email. Eligible applicants whose applications are approved will be pre-allocated to the foundation school requesting their application. How are you matched to a programming employer? As Mike said, each foundation school has their own approach to managing those applicants who are pre-allocated to that school. And I can certainly go through what we do in Wales, but it will be different to my neighbouring foundation schools in Severn or the Northwest. And so it's well worth having a look at the local foundation school information about how it's managed, okay? Some of them, they may pre-allocate you to preferencing to groups or programs or locations. It's up to that foundation school how they manage it, but they will obviously try to accommodate your reasons for pre-allocation within your match to program. Okay, as it says, most applicants will need to preference groups or programs or locations. A small number whose personal circumstances mean their foundation schools will need to match them to a specific program. So there are very rare occasions when there are a very small number of options for someone who's pre-allocated to a school, and your school will discuss that with you. As it says, some of the information is on the UKFPO website. Some of it, most of it, will be at a local level. So this is one of the things that's come up in some of the questions, and you'll be aware that there are changes to recruitment to the specialised foundation programme across the 4 nations. Although in Wales, we're actually continuing a process that we've managed since FP 2022. But pre-allocation does not apply to the foundation priority programme, so you cannot be pre-allocated to a priority programme, nor does it apply to the new specialised foundation programme selection processes managed separately by English medical schools, Scotland and Northern Ireland. It only applies to the main programme. However, that doesn't mean you cannot apply for both. But you will either be matched through one process or the other. So if you go through the SFP program and allocate to an SFP, you won't be using your pre-allocation, or you're matched via pre-allocation, you won't be going through the SFP process. Okay, so if you're successful in, as it says, if you apply for SFP through this route or FPP and your application is successful, you're automatically removed from the pre-allocation process to the main foundation program. And if you're not successful or unsuccessful, you're automatically included in the main program and your pre-allocation is honoured. So it's not to say you can't consider more options, but you can't be pre-allocated and then into an SFP or FPP. Linking, likewise, you can both apply for pre-allocation and link your application with a fellow applicant, okay? But if an applicant chooses to link their application and their pre-allocation request is approved, the link with the other applicant is broken. So you can't pre-allocate one person and then bring the other person who is a linked applicant into the same school. If your pre-allocation application is unsuccessful and the applicant is linked in the main foundation program application to another applicant, it will remain in place. So again, you can apply for one or other or both, but you cannot be pre-allocated and linked at the same time. And now we're going to go on to your questions.
Thanks, Tom. And I'd like to welcome Elaine. We got lots and lots of questions, so many thanks to those of you who sent them in. We have focused very much on the questions about pre-allocation. There were some on other things, but we very much focused on pre-allocation, as that is the topic of this webinar, and we'll try and answer as many of these questions as we possibly can in the time that we have left. So I'm going to start, Elaine, a couple of questions for you about allocation and program or group match. So if an applicant applies for pre-allocation, but their application for pre-allocation is unsuccessful, will their application for the foundation program be affected or disadvantaged in any way in a national pool?
No, there's no disadvantage. So if you're not successful at gaining a pre-allocation at that stage, then you simply go through into the national process automatically. There's no disadvantage to you whatsoever.
Okay, and once pre-allocated to a foundation school, is the preference informed allocation used to rank people within the foundation school?
Yes, it is. So basically at the point that everyone is allocated to foundation school, everyone is also given a computer generated rank. And that's given to all eligible applicants at that point in time. So you will be pre-allocated if you're successful for pre-allocation into your foundation school, but that rank will also be used alongside your preferences to then match you to a group and program.
Okay. And Tom, if the pre-allocation application is rejected, does that mean they can still have a chance to get their first choice deanery?
Yes, Mike, it does. So pre-allocation is for people who need to be in a place. If people are unsuccessful in their pre-allocation application, they can still preference that school first. As we know from last year's data, the overall figure for people getting their first preference foundation school was 75%, and a lot higher for many foundation schools, particularly those who were not who weren't oversubscribed. So yes, you can certainly get into the foundation school of your preference without pre-allocation.
And if you want to look which schools were very popular and which were less popular, and we very much stress that does not pertain to the quality of the training. The quality of training is good everywhere. This is just purely about the popularity. The competition ratios, the number of people who put somewhere as a first preference per post, have been published on the UKFPO website. Elaine, if someone has found out that they are pre-allocated, can they choose to reject it and go with their preference informed allocation?
Yes, there'll be a specific window within which applicants can withdraw from that pre-allocation, and the process for that will be available on the UKFPO website soon. So there will be a specific process to do that, so just look out for that.
We would hope that that is very rare, because the
Absolutely.
point of being pre-allocated is it's somewhere where you must be. So if you are pre-allocated, we would hope that it will be very unusual and really should only be because of a change in circumstance that would mean that they would then reject it. Okay, so moving on to the sort of how one applies for pre-allocation. Tom, in terms of supplementary evidence, can you supply supplementary evidence with your application for pre-allocation?
The simple answer, Mike, is yes, you can. I mean, the preference is for you to use the form and get your supporting signatory to use that form, because it's a much better way of ensuring that the requirements of that criterion are being answered in the boxes where the answers are given. So if you do get supporting evidence or supplementary supporting evidence, you need to ensure that the person who's written that has addressed all the questions being asked for that criterion. So it you know, and if it isn't there, then the panel has to consider the evidence in front of them. So if possible, I would encourage people to use the form as a means of demonstrating that you meet the criterion, but you can submit supplementary evidence. However, that evidence must be less than 12 months old because we want to be sure that it applies to the here and now rather than something that was written maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
Okay, thanks. Elaine, in terms of if you're applying for pre-allocation, do you still have to complete a general foundation program application form alongside the pre-allocation form, and what's the deadline for that?
Yes, so you do. So actually, there is only one form for both. So as in the pre-allocation is part of the main application form. There are obviously the word forms and supplementary evidence, etc., that are part of it, but pre-allocation is part, as we see it, of the main application, and all applicants to the foundation programme for 2025 and beyond will need to complete the main application form. That is absolutely mandatory for everybody. The deadline for doing that this year is the 9th of October, and it'll be midday British summer time, so that's really important, so midday in the UK for that deadline.
And please note, and we do have to say this every year, there are no exceptions. If yours comes in at 12:01, it will not be accepted at all for foundation program application. Our advice to you is complete the foundation program application form well before 9th of October midday. If you have an IT glitch or your Wi-Fi drops out or something like that, you'll then have plenty of time to still get your application in. We still do have, and we are able to look at when people are doing things on the Oriel system. We still have people completing and submitting their forms only a few minutes before the deadline. And I think that is a very, very risky strategy. Fill in the form, give yourself plenty of time to make sure that it's in and submitted. Moving on to another question, Tom, what sort of information would be helpful in supporting statements? What sort of things should people write?
Mike, the main thing is to make sure it addresses the questions being asked and it's factual. We see a lot of writing that adds quite a strong emotive element to the application, and we understand why people might do that, but and it's not that we're cold-hearted either, but that isn't the consideration of the panel. We have to consider it against the requirements of each criterion. So try not to go into a big long prose about the emotive elements of this. We want to see that the answers mirror the questions being asked for each criterion.
And I would add that knowing the individuals involved on the panels, they're all very experienced and good people, and they desperately want to support foundation program applicants where there is an actual need. But equally, where a lot of posts in a foundation school are pre-allocated, that reduces the number of posts available to those who aren't pre-allocated. So we always need to find a balance in terms of the support that people need. And that is the whole point of this process, is to support trainees who have a need in their transition from medical student to doctor. And the panels will absolutely do their best to ensure that that is the case, but they will also be very fair and treat all applications the same. Elaine, when you mean region your family home is in, is that referring to the foundation school or the specific trust or hospital board?
So that is referring to the foundation school, and there are 18 foundation schools over the UK. So you'll need to have a check on the website, on the guidance, which foundation school your home region would fall within, and then that is the foundation school you want to be applying for.
Thank you. And then another one for you, Elaine. Can I submit my supporting signatory evidence as a letter, such as from my doctor, instead of using part 2 in the application form?
So this is similar to the advice Tom had given a little while ago. So we really prefer everybody to use the form where possible, but we know on occasion it can be difficult for certain signatories to use the form. So in those occasions, yes, we will accept a letter. However, the same rules apply. Again, it needs to be no more than 12 months old, so less than 12 months old, maybe to phrase it both ways. And also the letter needs to answer all of the same questions that are in the form. So the information you provide must be this, it must have the same information as would be in the normal part 2 of the form. So please take care to check that that information is in the letter that's provided.
Thank you. Now, some questions about the specific criteria, and we'll do them in the order that they are numbered. So the first criterion about being a parent and legal guardian. Elaine, someone has sent in a question saying, my due date to have a baby is 2 days after the application deadline for the UKFPO. How can I apply for pre-allocation given that I may not have a birth certificate issued by that date?
Okay, so you won't be able to apply for pre-allocation because that won't be your current circumstance. You won't yet be a parent. And we do know that is a tricky circumstance. We fully appreciate that will be really tricky for anyone in that situation. There are further processes later on when you are a parent to apply through. So there is what's called an IFST process. Details are on the UKFPO website. Because your circumstances will have changed since the application window is closed and sort of between that time you were then allocated, you can use the IFST process to outline your current circumstances, which at that point will be, I am now a parent, and that will be taken into consideration for the IFST process. So it's by no means the end of the line for someone who's in that circumstance. It's really important to understand. We don't want to create anxiety. There is a different process to apply to, that's all.
Okay, thank you. And IFST stands for Inter-Foundation School Transfer, which is something that can happen if your circumstances change between application to foundation program and later in the process. And along similar lines, I guess, Tom, I'm currently undergoing the process of adoption approval with my partner, which should be concluded by March 2025. If I move regions from where I've been approved by the adoption panel, I would have to reapply with a different regional adoption agency and restart the whole process of approval. Can adoption approval be considered as a circumstance for pre-allocation?
The simple answer to that is no, it can't, Mike, at this moment in time. But I think, as we've already articulated, you wouldn't be able to apply under the pre-allocation criteria as it stands, but you could still preference that foundation school as your first preference. If you were unsuccessful in getting that foundation score in your first preference, as Elaine says, once you're accepted for adoption in March of next year, you could apply for an inter-foundation school transfer. So again, the process would still allow you to remain in a certain geography to meet the requirements of your adoption process. But it isn't a pre-allocation criterion as it currently stands.
Okay, and then Elaine, do children have to be of school age for the person to be considered for pre-allocation?
No, we'd consider a child of any age. So there's no minimum age for the child in order for you to apply through pre-allocation.
Is there a maximum age?
Yes, they would need to be a child age, not adult age.
Okay.
So I guess under 18.
Under 18, thank you. So any age up to the age of 18, and pre-allocation could occur. Okay, the next criterion is about significant caring circumstance. So a couple of questions that have come in about this. Tom, for criteria 2, how many additional pieces of evidence are needed and who should they come from?
we don't stipulate a number, but you will need the support of your medical school so that they're aware that you have had this caring responsibility during your time at medical school, and that they will answer again the requirements of that criterion. So we used to ask for care plans, etc. We just need to know that the medical school is aware of your caring responsibilities and can confirm that they have made adjustments accordingly.
Okay, and again, we really stress that this is where there are significant caring responsibilities. It's quite difficult to define that, absolutely, but it's really where, as Tom has said, adjustments were needed at medical school because of the care that you were providing for someone else. So similarly, Tom, regarding caring duties under the pre-allocation criteria, would someone be eligible if their caring roles were due to begin at the start of the foundation year, but they hadn't currently started?
So again, the answer is no, Mike. It relates to your current circumstances. So we often see applications saying that, once I graduate, I will replace my brother or sister who's been caring for my elderly parents. When they're going to be going off somewhere else in August of the next year, but it has to relate to the current situation, and so you cannot predict future. If that were to happen again, you might want to consider an inter-foundation school transfer at a later date. But for now, no, it has to apply to your current caring responsibilities rather than any future or potential caring responsibilities.
Okay, thank you. If we move on to the health and disability criterion, criterion 3, if someone has a disability which doesn't require pre-allocation to a particular foundation school, but I will need to be allocated to a hospital or trust that can accommodate my reasonable adjustments, how does that work, Elaine?
Thanks, Mike. So it would depend on the disability, and I think that's the first thing to take into consideration is each foundation school will look at the particular aspects of that. But essentially, this really does fall within the purview of the employment provider. So they would need to look at what reasonable adjustments were needed, and they can do that through the pre-employment check. So each trainee, when they enter, will need to fulfill certain pre-employment checks when entering the new employment. Please do declare those details there so that your employer is fully aware of what reasonable adjustments, what changes to your particular post or environment you may need. There's also the STEP process, which is a process implemented by UKFPO and works to essentially support trainees, and that's absolutely what it's about. It's very much about supporting new FY1s into that transition into their new employment, and there's a part of that form that will allow you to declare any of these health issues or any other issues or adjustments that you may need. They're not always issues, I should say that. Sometimes they're just adjustments and a way of life. So those are all then taken forward by your employer, and they are assessed, and they will see what adjustments can then be made on the ground for you. It's really important to use all of those avenues to declare these details so that your employer can do as much as possible to support you in your time as an FY1.
I would really reiterate that the STEP form, when you get the chance to do that later on this academic year, before you are allocated, is so important. The sooner that the foundation school and then your employer knows about what reasonable adjustments are required due to a health condition or a disability, then the sooner they can be in place. And we have lots and lots of evidence that where this has been very, very successful in allowing foundation doctors to take up their posts and thrive within their foundation program. So applicants are often worried about how confidential it is. I can assure you it is entirely confidential, but the more information you give us about a health condition or disability that needs reasonable adjustments within the work of an F1, then the more they can take place, and that has been a very successful program. So I'd really encourage you to be really open on your step form. And people won't judge you at all. It is purely so that we can make the adjustments when you start as an F1 that will allow you to thrive. Okay, moving on to the next criterion about extraordinary circumstances. Tom, are financial reasons considered for extraordinary circumstances?
Again, without sounding like a broken record, the answer is no. So no, financial reasons aren't extraordinary, but it wouldn't be. It doesn't meet that criteria.
Okay. And can you be pre-allocated if your partner is a doctor and is also applying for jobs across the country, thus ensuring you end up in the same area?
No, unless you are both applying to the Foundation Programme 2025 and therefore have linked your application, you cannot be pre-allocated to a part of the country where your partner, who may be a medic and in training or not at a different grade, or another health profession. So a committed relationship is not it does not meet any of our criteria.
And again, with all the criteria will be applied fairly and equitably in order to help as many foundation doctors as we can. Elaine, in terms of the educational circumstances, how does the university select the 5 students that will be allowed to pre-allocate due to performance at medical school?
So that is entirely the remit of the medical schools, and they will decide their process. That's not something UKFPO decide on or can advise on.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to criterion 5, the widening participation criterion. Tom, is applying for a bursary but not including the NHS bursary, such as a living bursary at some point in our journey as a medical student, enough to qualify as evidence for pre-allocation under that criterion?
So the man who says no, says no again. I think it's clear that you have to be coming into this from a widening participation background, entering medical school, and then receiving that financial support. Receiving that financial support alone does not meet criterion 5B, the widening participation. So it's entry into medical school through widening participation or widening access, and then the financial support rather than the financial support itself.
And what about if you met widening participation criteria but didn't enter medical school with a widening participation offer? Can you still apply for that pre-allocation criterion, Tom?
No, it's about at the moment the criterion is as set out. It's for those people who entered medical school through that widening participation background, not a subsequent consideration by the medical school.
Okay, and for this criterion, Tom, is the only piece of evidence needed to submit a proof of address? Do we not need to submit evidence of hardship funding during university or evidence of entry into medical school through a widening participation scheme?
So your medical school has to complete a section on this application, and they will make those statements. So that's why the forms are so useful. The form will say that they enter medical school under widening participation background, and they have received financial support. So the supporting statement comes from the medical school for criterion 5B.
Okay, thank you. And talking of proof of address, Elaine, in the guidance, there is lots of very clear guidance about what the proof of address needs to be. But what if a bank statement, for instance, just has a first name as an initial, for instance, Miss N. Smith? Is that acceptable? Or does it have to have the first name in total?
So it is acceptable. We are aware some banks only provide letters with an initial as the first name. So that's fine. On this occasion, we will accept that. And that, if it hasn't been already, that will be as part of the guidance added in. So that's very clear because we have had that question a few times from applicants.
Okay, thanks. And Tom, how many pieces of evidence do you need to prove your home address? Is it lots and lots of different things?
No, we just need one proof of address that meets the requirements set out in the guidance. So long as it's within 3 months for most of them, but up to 12 months for an annual statement such as council tax, then we only need one piece of evidence. We don't need it repeated several times, and we certainly don't want pieces of evidence that contradict with different addresses.
And Elaine, the driver's license needs to be dated within the last 3 months of the closing window, within 3 months of the application window in order for it to be accepted as proof of address?
That's correct. So we'll have a list on the website, a full list of pieces of evidence that can be dated within the last 3 months and pieces of evidence that can be dated within the last 12 months. Tom mentioned one there, which was a council tax form, which we know is an annualised document. So there'll be a clear list of each of those and what's counted in which category for applicants to follow. So please do refer to the website and keep checking back before submission for any updates and extra pieces of information. As we're getting questions through, we are adding updated sort of FAQs and extra information to try and answer applicants' questions.
And thank you. And that's the end of the questions. I think we can only just keep repeating, look at the guidance, look at it again, and then read it again. Most of the answers to questions that we get are in the guidance. I'm afraid if the answer isn't one that you like, it doesn't mean that it's not in the guidance. It means it's there and we have to abide by that. All of our guidance, all of the regulations around this process have been agreed with our stakeholders, including applicant representatives. And it's really important to us that we treat everyone fair and equitably. So the answers will be in the guidance. Do have a look at it and keep looking at it. And if you're not sure, just look again and fill in the application form according to the guidance that is there. Your medical school should be able to help you if you're a UK medical student. We had a session with them earlier in the week where we went through this process, so they should be clear as to exactly how things work and should be able to help you in the guidance. So with that, I'd like to thank Tom, Elaine, and the rest of the UKFPO team for their time in preparing this webinar. We would like to wish you the best of luck with your applications, whether that's for pre-allocation or for the main foundation programme. We wish you all the very best with that, and we look forward to seeing you at another webinar in the future. Have a good evening. Take care.